Hi everybody, happy Saturday and welcome to this year's family gathering. How blessed we are not only to have these occasions to get together, but to also enjoy one another the way we do. Because I'd like to publicly take a moment to acknowledge the family of my Uncle Chuck, who we lost this past December, and to extend to Lenore and her family, and to Jeanette and her family, as we extend our continued love, support, and condolences for their loss. Let us just take a moment, and I'm not crying, but inside I am. Let us take a moment in silent remembrance of Charles B. Davis. I'm almost done, people. I'm thrilled. Hey, Jeanette, did you hear what I just said? Well, you'll see it on DVD, and it's for sale. All right, here we have the Fabulous Four. In our midst are four of the most respected and admired men I've ever known. Mr. Joe Harold, father-in-law to my brother, and dad to my beautiful sister-in-law, Tammy. And again, whom for this day forward shall ever be known as Uncle Joe. But I want to tell you something about Uncle Joe. Recently, he and I had a phone conversation. We've never had an opportunity to actually sit down one-on-one and talk about anything substantial. Or substantial, what's the word I want?
Substantial.
Okay. Thanks, Uncle. But I wanted to include him in this panel. For a lot of reasons, I won't go into those, but when I called and talked to Uncle Joe, I was so overwhelmed and so moved by how eager he was to take part in this. And his actual words were, "I can't wait to tell you my story. I can't wait to talk about me and what I've gone through," or something to that effect. And and we talked a good 20 or 25 minutes. It was just awe-inspiring. Thank you so much for being part of this. I really, really appreciate it. We also have my Uncle Robert Jones, again, the last surviving brother of my mother, here with us today, and representative of my mom's side of the family, an added blessing. Thank you, Uncle. And even more so to have not only my uncle, my mother's brother, but to have my mother's sister again. Then there's my Uncle Ben, Mr. Benjamin H. Davis III, also a sole surviving brother of my father. Among the many gifts he brings to my life is the gift of my appreciation for the spoken word. By his example, I continue to articulate and orate with some with the smoothness of so apt with commands. Ain't that right on? That was bam. Couldn't wait to say that.
I grabbed my wallet.
Last and not least is my father, Mr. Waverly C. Davis Sr., who's been so gracious to open his home so that we may gather in this setting of comfort and nostalgia. Thank you, Dad. And see, that's all I have. Now, gentlemen, I've got a little, this is how this is going to work. As I mentioned, the four of these gentlemen and myself have sat down and we've talked about things, and the time that we spend together and the things we talk about, a lot of it family history, is so priceless, so very priceless. And I sit there like this as I listen to them go on and on and on about stuff, life, family history, and on and on and on. So I thought to myself, self, is it possible that I could bring what I get in those private sessions with these four to all of you? That is the goal today. Now, uncles and dad, I know you all aren't that big a fans of the new school technology, so I thought I'd keep it old school for you guys. With all the accuracy of Google and Yahoo, but with none of that pesky spam. So I've taken the liberty to come up with a few topics that I'm going to pose to each one of you. I'll start in order. I'll read the question or the comment to you. You will respond. When you're done, it'll go to you, and then to you, and then to you. Now, on paper and in my mind, this sounded like a brilliant plan. Oh, this sounded brilliant. But I thought that line for the food was going to run smooth too, so I don't know. So, oh, and speaking of which, Gene, Jerome, Uncle Ben, they handled that fish station, did they not? Thank you. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
All right, without any further ado, I'm going to get this rolling. And I'm going to start. Actually, let's really get old school.
At when point in your career when you felt as though you've made it? That's a hard question.
Should I read it again out loud?
Oh,
you got, okay.
Did everybody hear that?
Yeah, we heard it. Okay.
What? First and foremost.
Here, I'm going to read it again for him. The question was, professionally, at which point in your career did you feel, or at which point in your career when you felt as though you've made it? That question goes to you first. At what point in your professional career did you feel you had finally made it?
Well, I'd have
and
to.
You'll be next.
I'd have to say that it was really prior to my professional career. I really have to say, and my oldest son's going to disagree with me, but I have been lucky. All my life I've been lucky.
No, you've been blessed all your life.
Well, I've been blessed all my life. I was blessed with a family, my mother and grandmother and all the aunties and all that stuff that instilled in us how important family was, how important to do something with your life. And I was lucky enough that my last year of high school, Ford Motor Company came to Lincoln High School and they told me about an apprenticeship. And I was only 17, so I couldn't even get in the plant. And rather than sitting there waiting, I applied for a machinist job at the fire department, Detroit Fire Department. And
wait, stop right there. Who knew that? Oh, I know. Of all time. Would you repeat that?
The day prior to getting my apprenticeship at Ford, because I was too young to enter the factory, I applied for a machinist job at the Detroit Fire Department. The day I got the letter accepting me at the fire department, the next day I got a letter from Ford. So naturally I took Ford. So, and well, the rest is history, really. And I really attribute it to being prepared and being lucky.
Uncle Joe, take the same question. At what point in your professional career did you feel as though you had finally made it?
I mean, I don't know if I can classify myself as a professional. I was just a lucky young man. When I got out of the Air Force, I came to Detroit. And in 50... What year we get married? In 52, I think it was. Or 56, okay. I came here because my brother was going to the University of Detroit. And I was on my way out to Los Angeles. That's where I enlisted into the Air Force. I had no intentions of staying in Detroit, and I told my wife it had to be a mild winter because I was in January. You know, and she said, "Oh, it was just a warm body." but my brother gave a party for me, and well, prior to that, my wife was singing in the choir at St. George, and we went St. George Catholic Church over on Westminster there, and so we went to see the girls in the choir, and I laid eyes on her, and I didn't take my eyes off her since, you know. And I got a job at Ford Motor Company working on retractable hardtops.
Oh, yeah.
And when the last one of them went off the line, my job went off the line. I was still in reserves, and so a friend of mine at the reserve outfit told me they needed instructors out to Selfridge. So I started teaching out there until for 8 years. And then they wanted us to go on active duty to drop Agent Orange in Vietnam, and I didn't enlist to do that. So I got out of the service, and at the same time I was finishing my apprenticeship with the AFL-CIO in carpenter, be a carpenter. So I started working out of a local. At the same time, my brother had gotten a job with Detroit Edison as the EEOC, Equal Employment Opportunity, and he got me into Edison. And I got into Edison in '68. I started off as a laborer because at the time they said they wouldn't hire a black professional, a black guy as a journeyman. But I didn't care because Edison had a good package, you know, hospitalization, vacation, and all that stuff. So I went into Edison, and as a laborer, and to make a long story short, I retired as a supervisor over construction. And I took a lot of crap, but we all did. We all did back then.
Yep.
But that didn't deter me from, you know, I seen the handwritings on the wall. All of my kids, the ones that wanted to go to college, they were able to go to college. My two boys now, they got their own construction company. I have a daughter down at Dillard University, assistant communication director. And anytime you guys down in Louisiana, please visit her because she's hungry. You know, get the address from Tammy. She's and we all family.
That's right.
And she loves family.
That's right.
And one thing I gotta say, one of the, I don't know, I had grandmothers, but Grandma Davis was one of the people I'm so glad they've experienced talking to and loving on this planet.
Yep.
Their mother.
Yeah.
Thank you, Uncle Joe. Uncle Robert, should I repeat it?
Yes, please.
Professionally, at which point in your career did you feel as though you've made it?
That is a tough question. No, I think professionally was when I was accepted into the engineering program at Ford Motor Company Research and Engineering Center. I don't know can you hear me? I got a kind of a weak voice. I had worked at the 64-65 New York World's Fair, and the fair had come to an end, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And a gentleman came up to me, white, asked me what I was going to do when the fair is over. I told him, well, maybe since I've had experience here, I would sell used cars. And he said he'd been watching me for a while there, and I deserve better than selling used cars, and he would try to get me on at Ford. So one day I was at home, I got a call from him. He called me out and he said, I wanted to get you into public relations, but they were full at the time. He says, but they have there's an opening for a blueprint machine operator. He says, and the wonderful thing about this is that they have a class. If you take this class, you can become an automotive design engineer. They'll train you if you take this class. So he said, I'm sorry about the opening. He says, but if one comes up in public relations, I'll still call you. So I took the job as a blueprint machine operator. And in Nothing Flat, I had gone through several promotions and ended up in program timing or something. And I took this course. I was enrolled in this course, sort of like your apprentice course, where they taught you drafting and design engineering. And so I finished that course with honors, and lo and behold, another white fella at Ford Motor Company in personnel said, you know, you're eligible for a fellowship. Ford will send you to school for any school you want in any country you want. And being a fool that I am, I said, well, I'll go to Wayne State here in Detroit. But they sent me, and I graduated from Wayne State. And I was accepted into their engineering as a novice engineer. And then shortly thereafter, I got promoted into management. And that's when I thought I had kind of made it, when I became the engineer
What year
there.
was that?
When I made management was 1989, but who's counting? Yeah.
Excellent.
Okay.
I forgot what he done. Professionally, at which point in your career did you feel as though you had made it? Now,
as Robert said, that's a tough question. I've been fortunate enough to have had any number of experiences in a number of communities. I too attended and finally graduated from the University of Detroit. I was scheduled after Air Force ROTC to report to Kelly Air Force Base in Texas for flight training. I knew I was going to have a problem with the math because I had a problem with statistics, and I was scheduled to graduate and didn't want a D in the course, and so I withdrew from the course and ended up withdrawing from U of D with 128 credit hours. Okay, which meant that after not going in the Air Force, going into a GMC truck and coach to work for a year, buying a brand new 55 Ford Fairlane with a Continental kit that I didn't have a month, and here comes the draft notice. And you can't take. So I ended up being drafted, expecting to go into the Army, and was sworn into the United States Navy on December 1st, 1955, which I later found out was the same date that Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on the bus in Montgomery, Alabama. Did my time, enjoyed the service time, served on the aircraft carrier Wasp, watching planes taking off and all of that business, and got out of service and decided to go back to school. And my problem was that with 128 credit hours below a C average, how do you get enough credit to graduate? And Dr. Francine Ireland's house sat down with me and reviewed my transcript and carved out a way for me to graduate from U of D with a degree in philosophy, with minors in French and philosophy, and told me, I don't think you can do it. And I had to take an exam to get back in to be readmitted, and was readmitted, finally completed and got the degree, and then and was working for the City of Detroit Welfare Department, working there full time. I had been working for the post office before service, worked there part-time, had gotten a certificates license by the state of Michigan, was selling stocks. I had 3 jobs and was going to school, but I was trying to make up for lost time. So I left the City of Detroit to work in Royal Oak Township, where we grew up. I was a rehabilitation officer and convincing people to accept grants and loans to improve their property. And then the State of Michigan Civil Rights Commission was created. And I took an exam for a position with the Civil Rights Department and was supposed to staff an office in Detroit. And Clyde Cleveland, some of you will remember Clyde Cleveland, was supposed to go to Benton Harbor, Michigan. And Clyde was an activist. He used to picket on his lunch hour at the old building downtown, just protesting segregation. And Clyde decided, and we were colleagues at the welfare department, he decided that was a ruse to get him out of town. So he turned down Benton Harbor. And so I was approached to open the office in Benton Harbor. And I did. And I'll tell you, it was not called Peyton Harbor for nothing. Some of you may remember the House of David. But I wondered, how did this group of black people end up in Benton Harbor, of all places? And what I learned was that these were people who had formerly worked in the migrant stream and had settled out of the migrant stream into Benton Harbor because there was a lot of industry there. And all that industry, of course, left a long time ago, not unlike Detroit. So I did that, and for a year, I administered the office in Muskegon. There were 5 counties in Muskegon, western Michigan, and I had 5 counties in southwestern Michigan, so I had half of the state. And so I was approached by officials in Benton Harbor to run a Model Cities program. Some of you may remember that program. There was one here in Detroit. So I accepted that position and then went back to Benton Harbor. And I talk about that because I really think that those were the key experiences that made my professional life. That having that kind of responsibility with a lack of experience in those areas, that was really, 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 I think, the thing that made my career, that gave me the confidence that I could pretty much handle what was thrown at me. And so I did that, and then I ran into a lady who was chairman of my board, who people told me actually wanted my job, and things really got difficult. And so I ended up, some of you may remember Sam Dixon, who was fire chief here in Detroit. He was subsequently fire chief in Flint. And I'd gone to Flint to take that position. And got this lady, and was enduring a lot of stress. And Sam finally said to me, he said, why don't you just leave? And that's what I did. I decided to leave. I was going to do some consulting. The first consulting job I did, the guy stiffed me on the payment. I decided that was not what I wanted to do. And then I determined that I could live my life without working. In other words, I could retire. Yeah. And that's what I did.
You all right?
All right.
That's what I did.
Well, I don't remember my mother because she died of tuberculosis soon after I was born. My father, he died when I was 3, not quite 4. But I had some loving aunts, and I classify them as my parents. My mother's sisters, there was 3 sisters. And when my mother passed, the sisters took the responsibility of raising my brother, my sister, and I. And this was during the Depression. And Biloxi was a little fishing village at the time, and it relied on tourists too. So there was a little town called DeLisle, Mississippi, that was about 30 miles north of Biloxi, that they were raised in. But when my grandfather passed, they moved to Biloxi because of the fishing industry. And my aunts, you know what love is because his family's made of love. And that's what I experienced coming up. And we all Depression people, kids, you know. But we made do. And with, well, prayer and we was taught about the 3 P's, you know, proper preparation prevents poor performance.
That's right.
And that was our lifestyle.
Yeah. Yeah.
And with prayer and love, you can conquer any and everything.
Thank you.
My parents were, gives me a chance to practice. Those of you who haven't ordered a copy of The Last Sleigh Ride, a Detroit folk history. In it, you will see a pretty good description of my mother and my father. I'll begin with my father first. My father was a baseball player, played first base, among other positions, primarily first base. But he was a poet, a literary man, very creative, and a hunter. He grew up in Natchez, Mississippi. But so he was, for a black man at that time, I would call him a scholarly man. Like I said, poetic and very creative. And he was very good at reciting poetry and telling history and playing baseball. He was cared for his family with 7 boys and 2 girls. One of the fondest things I remember of him is on the days when he were off, he would get up very early and, like you always did, and make breakfast for everybody. And then he would make oatmeal cookies for us. And he'd make them real big, and he'd make them by the dishpan full with 9 children, I guess you could imagine. So he'd make several dishpans full of these oatmeal cookies. So, and of course he was a hunter. My father earned a living as a spray painter at Ford Motor Company, and he eventually died of cancer. We think it's from the paint. But he was a great and wonderful father. He died unable to see me enter high school. I was going to go in the 9th grade the summer that he died. So my mother was kind of feisty, a very attractive lady, and she too was scholarly, and she believed in having lots of books in the house and piano, and we outgrew the piano. The family got so big and the house so small that we had to set the piano out. But we had a lot of books, and she was very good at mathematics. And she taught me a lot about, when I was in high school, algebra and trigonometry just on her own. But she read a lot, and like I said, was scholarly, doted upon the children, tried to minister to all their particular needs. 9 children, you know that was a job. But she was a fine and wonderful woman, and she taught me about the Lord Jesus Christ, and I'm forever grateful for that. And so that about sums it up for my 2 wonderful parents.
Excellent, excellent.
They had so much, what's the word I want? Well, their parents instill in them what they instill in us. We had my paternal grandmother, well, she raised 12 kids. And she was the backbone of what the Noel Davis family is.
Thank you.
She really, everybody respected her, everybody paid attention to her, and she wasn't a dominating person, but she told you what she felt, and she'd get the point across that if you could do this way, everything will be fine. And that's the way it turned out. Now, my paternal grandmother, she was, she's a quarter Indian, and she was so mean that we stayed in a place called West Block in Alabama. And at that time, back in those days, you know how they treated Negroes, okay? But my grandmother was so dominating that she threatened the sheriff one time. And everybody, the white population down there, would tell everybody else, do not bother Pickett because she's crazy. And that protected us when we used to go down there and visit my grandmother. So I would say, and my mother would actually, she got us out of Alabama because more than likely, if my mother hadn't had the guts and gall to bring us out of Alabama, we might still be sitting down there, sitting on the ice house steps, really. But she brought us up here, and with all my aunts and uncles and all that, they helped her out. And I think she did a good job.
Amen.
Ben, pick a card, any card.
I don't remember the exact time. However, I would say when I was first eligible that I voted for president, because the importance of having the franchise, arguably the most important thing about having the franchise is to exercise the franchise. And that is one of the disappointing things in our society today, that see people who don't vote. What was it, 6% turnout in the last, 4% in the last election? And my brother talked about Alabama and a place where you could just disappear and nobody would know what happened to you, let alone trying to vote. And so you have people here who don't exercise the franchise, and people who died, gave their lives in order that people could vote. I mean, it's abominable. It's difficult to understand that. And so I would say that the first time I was eligible, I'd bet money that I voted.
Okay. Dad, who did you vote for the first time for president?
Who was before Nixon?
Gerald Ford.
Huh?
No, he was after.
Johnson. Johnson, I think, was the first president I really voted for. And he, although he was a Southerner, and he had his ideals, but at that time, the South was so screwed up. Jesus Christ. And I don't know who he ran against, but I thought he was a better choice than whoever he ran against. Goldwater. Oh, yeah, that's the one. That's the one. Yeah, so that's it.
Uncle Joe?
Johnson. He was
Johnson?
Right.
Mm-hmm. Uncle Bob?
Eisenhower.
Eisenhower. Why Eisenhower?
He was a Republican. blacks traditionally were Republicans since the Civil War.
Yeah.
Since and that's what we were taught. We were raised Republican, and so that and a war hero, and that was it.
Next question goes to you, Uncle Joe.
Still into you growing up. You know, I didn't have any choice but being baptized a Catholic. My grandmother, all of my family. And those nuns, the kids still, my school is still on it. My grandfather built the church in the school. And we had the Josephite priests and the Blessed Sacrament nuns. These are Irish women that gave up their lives for blacks and Indians. And my grandmother was the housekeeper for the nuns, and my aunt, was, well, I call her my mother, she was the housekeeper for the priests. And I was a typical little boy. I remember, playing with frogs and crawdads. We had little streams running around. And I picked up a little garter snake and put it in a little, they had the inkwells in the desk in those days.
Yeah.
And so I put the snake in the inkwell. And her plaits was running right down. And I weaved a little garter snake in her hair, And our girl, I kind of gave her a yank and she snapped her head around. I liked the girl. She was a cute girl, And the nun was always walking around with a Bible, with a big. And she picked me up and threw me out the window.
Jesus Christ.
And then my grandmother come over. I don't know how they get word, what I did. And my mom came over, And the only one that saved my life was the priest. Because he said he was a typical little boy. But the kids, my grandkids today, they like to see the window I was thrown out of in that school. But that's one of the religion was the value.
Thank you, Uncle Joe. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to kind of speed this up for a lot of reasons. But do you see how this is just magic? Could you imagine to have this generation among you and to be able to sit down and pick their brains? I mean, fantastic. So I'm going to go through the lightning round. Ding, 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 ding.
That's right. I tell you, things are so out of hand. And the very first thing that comes to my mind is that nobody in this generation, I'm talking about the present generation, respects authority. There's nobody that's afraid to die now. That was the most worst thing that could happen. When people walk, they kill themselves, they get killed, they get put them in situations to get killed. And I can't answer that because I don't understand it. I just don't understand it. It just blows my mind that people would think the way they think, really. Honestly. And then just look at it, it's on that subject, just look at what's happening all over the world. Everywhere. Everywhere. Nobody cares for authority. They're not afraid to die. So what do you do to somebody that's not afraid to die? There's nothing you can do. So I really can't answer that question. I can't answer it.
When we was coming up, it was like that village concept. Anybody that was older than you
respect it.
That's right. And I don't know, my grandmother could look at me and the fear of God will be in you. I mean, you whatever she said do, you did it. I mean, with no questions asked, And we wasn't raised with a menu. Whatever was on that table, you prayed and ate, and you thank God for it. That was, but it was the respect for authority
Right.
was inborn within you.
Yeah.
I mean, you see what your older brother got. You didn't want that.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad, he never used it, but he had a razor strap. And he cut those slits in it, and hung it on the kitchen door. That was it.
Yeah.
Uncle Bobby, today, what advice would you give?
3 things I would give them. Fear God. The second would be to love your country. We live in an experiment. We live in a land that operates in a way that has never operated in the history of the world. It is a tremendous experiment, and we're about to lose it. On our coin is the value of America. On every coin that we have, it's in God we trust. Out of many, one, e pluribus unum, and liberty. And if we must understand that without heritage, every generation has to start over. If we do not get involved in our country and in the values that it stands for, if we're going to lose it, and there's nowhere for us to go. Let nobody make no mistake. They can sell you all kinds of things. But if you do not fear God, love your country, which involves loving your family, we will have nothing. That's my advice. Get to know the values of your country. Read about it. Learn about it. Learn about the men who gave their life and fortune for it. And you can turn this nation around and enjoy and overcome what Waverly and Joe and Ben are telling you that's encroaching upon us. We can do this. That's the advice I give to you. Oh, one other thing. I'm going to ask Winston, my friend from New Jersey, and his sister and brother, to pass out to each one of you one of my American Eagles. That's a part of my advice. Thank you. Whenever you want to. Yeah.
What advice would you give our youth today?
Well, I find it difficult to comment after Reverend Jones here laid it out. But he's right on the money. What I would say is that if we would live the golden rule, doing unto others as you would have others do unto you, there would be a sea change in our behavior.
Amen.
And the second thing that I would stress would be the importance and the dignity associated with hard work and independence.
Amen.
All right. Daddy, is family reputation important?
I think it's one of the most important things. I really do. That's when we were growing up, and even in Alabama, but mostly when we were here in Michigan, the thing that was instilled, not taught us, it was instilled in us that do not ever make the family sorry for what you did. Mm-hmm. Never embarrass the family. And I've lived my life like that. We used to go, you kids might can relate to it, we used to go Halloween and throw cabbages and soap windows and all that stuff. And the five of us, we'd go out and meet on the school ground and everybody would pick a house. And I'd go home. And then about 10, 15 minutes later, I'd come back out. They said, "Where were you, Waverly?" I said, "I was over there." Didn't you see me? But really, I say family values. And don't embarrass the family. That's the key. Never embarrass the family.
Is family reputation important?
Sure. I mean, you don't realize that every move you make, your kid is going to, that's the example you're going to set for your kids. and I don't know what some parents think, they getting away with, but it's no wonder some kids are the way they are because of the fact that they're parents.
Yeah.
Example. That's what the example that they set for their kids. Yeah. It embarrasses me sometimes. I can be in a store and hear what some parents be doing in front of their children. But that's the dilemma we're in. We wasn't raised that way.
Uncle Bobby?
Yeah, I have to echo what Uncle Joe says. It begins with the parents, the mother, the father, and then they hand it down to the children. And whatever one does in the family, it's going to affect that family, in-laws, outlaws. It accelerates. So family values are very important, not only for that family, but also for the community and eventually for the nation.
Good. Uncle Ben, I'm going to give you the last word. I think we're getting a little restless back here.
Okay. Well, I felt a sprinkle too.
Yeah, and we're trying to beat the rain. So I'll give you the last choice. Is family reputation important?
Well, I have 3 grandchildren sitting here. Phyllis, Winston, Brian. And I think they can tell you that I've talked to them and defined reputation.
Good.
And I've defined reputation simply as what folks say about you when your name come up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And that you can't control that. However, you can influence it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are of good reputation, and people know that you are of good reputation, when your name does come up, it's like having people on the front lines working for you.
Amen.
Okay? And it ain't magic. Okay? All right?
Amen.
You want to move it?